everybody. It's Mark Bloomhard again, founder and CEO of Boulder & Co. Creative Studios. And today's episode actually is on becoming a creative director. This is actually part 3. We have had so many responses and questions to the first 2 that I'm just going to continue on, just kind of marching in the same line. I have no idea when we'll stop. This is part 3. So we've gotten a lot of comments, a lot of questions. Ariana Daniels is asking for books on becoming a creative director. So I think that's an unbelievable question. So what we're going to probably have is probably another part dedicated completely to the books that are out there, and just kind of, maybe I'll give like 5 or 6 books and just kind of unpack each one, just to become a creative director. So the other thing is that I think his name was Diedrich. Diedrich wrote, and he talked about having a very troubled past. He was fighting substance abuse. He's lost, just kind of suffered the loss of so many things, family and friends, and just getting through this chapter in his life. He's talking about now he wants to kind of explode and look for something that he can really focus on. And I'm telling you, this episode is actually for you, my friend. I don't know where you are in the world, but this is for you. So everybody else, feel free to tune in. But I just kind of want to address this, just this rawness. This one's for you. So I took a course in my degree is actually in BFA, the Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I went to CCAD. And before I went to CCAD, I stumbled around quite a bit. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. My dad was a mechanical engineer. I thought about becoming a chiropractor. I started at Ohio State University, and I was majoring in architecture and aviation. So I wanted to be a pilot. So go figure, right? Completely 2 different kinds of, thought patterns. And during that time, I liked the psychology of architecture, and I liked the aviation, but it just, for different reasons, I moved on and went to an art school. And when I was at this art school, I took one class that changed my life, and it was on modern education. And the teacher talked about art, and art was this expression of the soul. And if you look back, and I'm just going to say this, I'm going to be wrong, but this is the way I remember it, okay? So if you look kind of back in art really served several purposes. At first you had like hieroglyphics, and then it turned into paintings, and then the paintings were telling a story. So you go to the cathedrals and stuff, and you see these parables, and Jesus walked on the world, and Paul fell from his horse, and you had Caravaggio, and you had all these different ones, like the masters, the Dutch masters. I mean, you can go to Europe, and it's just this, this smorgasbord of visual creativity. And it was this, especially when you entered into the Dutch masters, you had this unbelievable mastery of the craft of painting that almost nobody could touch. Just very realistic, and it still had all the symbols and icons and everything of just classic modern or classic art. And then something unbelievable happened. The camera was invented. And so instead of hiring some well-known, artist that has spent his life tutoring under another artist to come and paint your son for 6 months, then somebody could sit in front of you for 6 seconds and hit the shutter button and click. It was committed for history. And it really shook up the art world, if you will. Everybody was like, "What's the point of art? What is the point of art? What's the point of bringing somebody in with a paintbrush and maybe painting that person who, the way they looked? Then you have somebody else come in with a camera and snap. They know it's what they look like." And so then you started getting to these, the Impressionists, right? And Impressionists were like, they were saying art needs to be something more. It was an expression of light, but it was also this expression of the soul. And during that time, all these people were coming together, and somewhere, and I like I said, I don't even have my facts. I just want to keep it this way in my mind. There was this guy, and his name was Jackson Pollock, and his mom was, she was from New York City, so she was very, and she was really in the art scenes. She married a farmer, I think it was Nebraska or Iowa or something like that. And she grew up in this little farm and just longed desperately for the New York scene and the art scene. And as her children grew up, there was two that showed, actually one that showed incredible promise. And she trained that person and that kid, and the kid grew up and went to New York City and, joined the art schools and kind of became, had their own little fame, if you will. That was Jackson Pollock's older brother. And so he came to New York City and painted these glorious scapes of farmlands and, Nebraska and blah, blah, blah. And it was just so perfect and so pretty. And, and he was good. He had mastery of the brush and everything else like that. So, he kind of had a name for himself. And then his little brother came into the scene. His name was Jackson Pollock. So he was following his brother's footsteps. And I can't remember his brother's name. I don't even want to know his brother's name. So here he came through, and he just wasn't the same. He just wasn't. Like he didn't have the mastery. He didn't have the appreciation. He didn't have the patience. He didn't have it. But what he had more than anything else was this cry that he wanted to be an expression of himself. He wanted to leave his footprints in the sands of time. He knew that something, it was like this, it was this drawing to this medium that it was this siren that he just couldn't ignore. And it just would sit there and press it on me. He became an alcoholic and was just this tormented soul, and he just wasn't. He tried to do these little landscapes, and he couldn't. And in frustration and just probably drunken rage, I haven't even watched the movie because they say the movie paints him in just this horrible light. But in a drunken rage, he's smoking, and he's got this canvas on the ground, and he's smoking, he's drinking his whiskey, and he takes his paintbrush and just throws paint on, and he looks at it, he stares. And it was exactly the expression of his soul. It was just this perfect conduit from his soul and his cry. They just, imagine that. He loved his mom. He wanted, make his mom proud. And he takes another paintbrush, dips it in, and he smacks it down again. And it's like, just spreads. And he looks at it, and he does it again. He does it again. And he does it again. He grabs something else, and he just throws it down. He throws it down. And on the canvas, you see cigarette butts, and you see just shit that's from a studio in there and just laying on the canvas, and he just doesn't care. And he's just going ape shit on this. And he's like spreading this canvas with this art and this ink. And it turns into art, and it's like, and he can't sell any of this. He can't sell any of it. Like, nobody's like, what is this? This is not art. This is not Impressionism. This is not Cubism. This is not like all these different, but it's him. It's expression. And that's really what modern art is, right? So this modern art isn't that you dip into the skills and the skill sets and the mindsets, and you're doing parables and stories and everything else like that of like the classics. That was done. That's over. It's done. If you want to keep doing that, that's fine. But there's all these different ways that you can have expression. And how were you expressing yourself? I'm like, and I think that all artists have this cry that it was me. I was here. I was on this world, and I walked through. And please, don't let me just walk through and I just get erased. And so when you look at that, especially somebody like Diedrich, he's like, you know what? What do I do? I've had this past I'm not really that proud of. This past I'm kind of running away from. What's this next chapter? And I've got this unbelievable, this unbelievable cry to succeed. That's what I'm like. Sorry for being long-winded, but that's what I got from Jackson Pollock. And actually, one of our kids' name is Jackson because of that. Not because I thought his paintings were all that great, but it was more. I love his paintings, but it was more than that. It's this cry of the human spirit, this cry of the, it's like the soul, this expression of soul. And so when you look at that, when I think about branding and having a meaningful connection on people, that's your medium. So Jackson Pollock, his medium was the canvas and oil painting and this fury of delivery, right? And other people are just wizards with, I worked for years as a stone sculptor, right? I love stone sculpting. It's a lot quieter. You sit there, but it's three-dimensional. You feel it. It's tactical. It's like my daughter's really into, painting, and she used, latex painting, acrylics. She does incredible work with that, and that's her expression. She's really into cameras. That's her expression as well. Some people are into poetry, some people on and on and on. But I find my expression is being a creative director. that can go out there and touch people and touch people at so many different levels. I help the business owner and I connect with these people, and to me, business, being a creative director, is connection with the soul. That's all it is. So, and everything is at your fingertips, right? So from the written word to, multimedia to video. We tell our video team all the time, I'm like, if I see a video, I need people crying or laughing. That's the bar, right? Because my medium is actually connection. My medium is that emotional connection with people, right? And so if you see that when you have this trouble pass and you're like, I feel that, then embrace it. Not embrace it in kind of this weird way, you don't know what to do with it, but embrace it and say, you know what? You could take that rage and you could take that pain and you could take that hope and you could take that faith and you could take that, everything that's good and everything that's bad. I mean, that's what connects you to people, right? So you could take that and you could deliver it to them and you can make their life more meaningful. When I worked for a really, really large company, and I worked on a project. It was for Ferrari, and it was reintroducing Maserati to the American market. So back in the 80s, Maserati was on the American market, and they did very poorly. Because they did so poorly, they pulled it back out. So you couldn't buy a Maserati for years and years and years in America. And then, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Ferrari purchased them, and they said, hey, we need help reintroducing Maserati back into the American market. So one of my clients actually at one point was Ferrari. And so Ferrari was a 12-cylinder car, and they're kind of basically saying, hey, you're not a man until you buy a 12-cylinder car there, buddy. Very high-end, 275,000, all these stories and everything with that. It was just an incredible experience. Very, very high-end. And then we turned around, and I was working on the rebranding of McDonald's. And back then, McDonald's was just known for this real cheap fast food. It was like, I'm like, and so what they want to say is, American people don't really need this anymore. What they want is more fast casual, and we want to make, make the food more wholesome, if you will, and, on and on. So we're part of that rebranding as well. So basically had a little bit of a whiplash. And I went from designing experiences for cars at $275,000 all the way down to a $2 combo meal, if you will. And how do you do that as a creative director? You've got to find meaning for it. So the one is pretty obvious, like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's kind of like the pinnacle of my career. But the other one, what about that? So I don't want to sell more fast food to more fat kids. Like, how do I find meaning with that? So you kind of have to dig deep many, many times as a creative director and say, how do I find meaning with that? The way you find meaning with that is in the hope that you can create something with McDonald's that's something a little bit more pure, that's something a little bit more high nutrition, that's something that touches these people, and you give them the salads and all kinds of stuff because they're going to go to McDonald's anyways. And oh, by the way, instead of hitting like maybe 1 out of 10,000 people that can afford a Ferrari, you're hitting billions and billions and billions of people every year because that's who's buying the hamburgers, whether you're part of it or not. So I'm just begging you with everything. I think that people feel that from me. You've got to have that, and you've got to embrace it, and you've got to just put it out there. Connect with these people, because this is what they're hiring you for, is this ability to connect on a very raw and visceral level with so many people. Understand who they are, just have the compassion and the empathy and understand where they are in life, and be able to cross that gap and take that corporation that you're working with or that person that you're working with and be able to cross that bridge and connect with somebody that needs them. So hopefully that helped you, and hopefully I answered your question. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.